So we're going to start talking about our ankle and foot injuries. And you can see I've put up a couple injuries here. This one looks not as bad. This one looks a lot more severe. But what we need to do before we start talking about the injuries is figure out some basic anatomy, because when we see some signs of inflammation here, some swelling, we need to know what structures are under there so we can have an idea of what structures and what things are being injured, affected. This one obviously looks like it's pretty much more severe. And if there's some swelling down here that we can't see because it got cut off by the picture, but if there's some swelling down here on this specific bone, or is it on this specific bone, where's the pain? This may be swelling from the foot that's kind of traveling up there. So we just need to have a basic idea of our anatomy. The notes pages are on your portal. I would prefer to do this in person, but if this is the best we got to do it with the best of what we got. All right, so let's get started as we get going. We're going to start about the bones of the lower leg. I want to show you the left leg. So you're looking at the left leg right here, and we're going to talk about our lower leg bones, our tibia and our fibula. Let me give you some anatomy looking things right there. So same thing, same left leg, and we're looking right dead on here. This big bone on the inside, or the medial, so medial means inside, is the tibia, and then the lateral smaller one, lateral means outside, is the fibula. This word malleolus, this is going to be an important landmark for us. It's these little bumps right here. You can probably feel those on your ankles if you just take your thumb and your index finger and you go over your ankle on either lateral and medial side, that big bulbous bone that's right there. You're going to find your medial and lateral malleolus. Make sure you know tibia is the medial malleolus, or the medial bone with the medial malleolus, and the fibula is the lateral bone, and that has the lateral malleolus. So as we continue, then we get into the foot, and you can see I've taken the lower leg off, and we're looking straight down on the foot. And so the first section of this foot is going to be this back section from here back, and it's the tarsals. There's actually 7, but I'm going to want you guys to be responsible for 2 of them: the calcaneus, which is your heel bone, and the talus that sits underneath the tibia, basically. So you have right here is the talus, and then you walk on your calcaneus as you go through. So those are the only 2 that I'm going to make you know. Then you get into this section right here, this blue section right here. These are long bones, metatarsals. So you're going to have to know those. You are going to have to identify some of these on the exam, and these are going to be landmarks, especially this 5th metatarsal tuberosity. So this is the medial side inside of the foot, and we start counting 1 all the way over to 5. This is the lateral side of the foot, and so this is our 5th metatarsal, and there's this little bump that we're going to palpate when we tape, and that'll be an important landmark that you'll want to be aware of, as I just said. Then you get up into the toes, right? So you have all these phalanges. There are 14 total, and you can see there's a little bit different picture. There's 14 total here in my phalanges. The big toe has 2, and the rest of them all have 3. When they have 2, what we're going to call them is the one that's further away is distal, which means further away. The one that is closer is proximal. You'll need to know those terms, not only for these, but for the joints as well. And so when we start naming joints, these phalanges right here, so we have a distal phalange of the second toe, middle, and then proximal phalange of the second toe. And then on this picture here, you can definitely see the metatarsals 1 through 5, and then there's that talus sitting right up underneath the tibia and the calcaneus underneath. So then we move on to our joints, and really there's a lot of joints, but the ones I'm going to make you from an ankle standpoint, I got the talocrural joint, and I'm covering it right here. It is the tibia and talus. I'm going to add the fibula in there just because I feel bad for them, but really the joint really occurs at this joint right here. And what I want you to know is not only the bones. I will ask you, hey, what bones make up the talocrural joint? What bones make up the subtalar joint? But I'm also going to ask you the motions. So this is where we get dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. I'll expand on that here in a little bit. My subtalar, so underneath the talus, is going to be the talus and the calcaneus, and it is going to do the other 2 motions, this inversion and eversion motion. When we get to, I'm not going to do too much joints in the midfoot here. We're going to get all the way down to past the, between the metatarsals and the phalanges. That's when you get this metatarsal phalangeal joint right there, and there's 5 of those. And then you have these interphalangeal joints, and this is where we have the proximal and distals. So the farthest one out here, this distal joint between 2 phalanges, is the distal interphalangeal joint. And then we have a joint here, which is closer to the body between 2 phalanges. This is the proximal interphalangeal joint, or the PIP. And then this right here, all across here, is going to be our metatarsal phalangeal joints. So yes, pay attention. You will have to identify these on an exam, and so that's going to be important. As we get to the ligaments, I'll show you these. There's 4 ligaments I want you to know. I'll start with the easy one first, right? Because this is the medial side, or the inside. Here's your big tibia. This is a deltoid ligament. There's actually a whole bunch of different parts, but we're just going to call it one. And then we have on the lateral side, so here's our fibula, lateral malleolus. This first one that we see here is the anterior talofibular ligament. So talofibular sounds legitimate because that's the talus and the fibula, so it connects those two. Anterior means the front side, so make sure you know that. Then if we just work ourselves clockwise, right below there, we're going to have a calcaneal, so it goes to calcaneus fibular ligament. And then we have another ligament that goes from the talus, or from the fibula to the talus, and that is the posterior, because it's in the back. So make sure you get those down, write that stuff down. Posterior is the back side, anterior is the front side. You will have to, again, know these ligaments. So these are the ligaments that are on the lateral side. These are the ligaments on the medial side. As we get into those motions that I talked about, dorsiflexion. So we have this is all occurring at the talocrural joint. You can write that down, or I suggest writing that down. I do want you to know what dorsiflexion is. I put another picture up here. There it is. So this person right here is dorsiflexing right there, walking around on their heels. I don't need you to know the amount of motion. I do want you to know that this is the muscle right here in the front of the, come back. In the front of the shin is the anterior tibialis, or tibialis anterior. That's our dorsiflexor. So that's what I want you to know. The other one is plantar flexion. And again, you don't need to know the degrees, but I do want you to know this is your calf muscles. And so you can see this back foot is pointed. So your toes are pointed into plantar flexion. And you can see this calf muscle, which is your gastrocnemius and soleus, is contracted and really working hard as this person is plantar flexion and pushing off. The other 2 motions that I want you to know are the inversion E version, that side-to-side motion. So if you're looking at, this is now the right, no, this is still the left. Geesh, I got my rights and lefts mixed up. But so if I go in, so if I'm looking at the left foot and I go in, that's my inversion. If I try to go out, that's eversion. There's way more motion when you go in than when you go out. So that's kind of a good way to tell if you're doing the right one. If I'm inverting, if I have a lot of motion, then that's inversion, and eversion, you're not going to have a lot of motion. So you'll need to know which one is which, and then I want you to know the tibialis posterior. It's actually behind the tibia, which, thank you for the posterior name. And then on the lateral side, you have this peroneus longus and peroneus brevis, 2 muscles on this lateral side that pull this out into eversion, peroneus longus and peroneus brevis. Brevis is just means short. So when you see that, that's just a shorter version of that same muscle. So then we get into the actual injury. So we got the basic stuff down. We get into the actual injury. So this is the inversion. When you have any ankle sprain, when you go back to when we talked about sprains in general, joints, ligaments getting torn, getting stretched, the mechanism is it's being forced beyond its normal range of motion. So in the inversion motion, if it gets forced, you land on somebody's foot, and these ligaments out here are the ones that get stretched and, a lot of times damaged. So what I want you to know about inversion ankle sprains, when it's too much inversion, it's going to be these lateral ligaments. anterior talofibular ligament here, the calcaneal fibular ligament here, and then the posteriors back here, which you see. And you can see that this is the more common of them, and it's very, very, common to have that inversion ankle sprain. Man, that's a bad one too. The eversion side, so eversion, it's a little bit harder because you don't have that motion, and we'll get to that here in a second. But eversion ankle sprains, you can kind of see right there. It's very hard to get a picture of an eversion ankle sprain. This is an old picture because this doesn't happen. I want you to know eversion, too much eversion is going to stress the medial side, which is the deltoid ligament. That's what I want you to know. All right, so inversions are more common. I'm going to tell you why. If you look at this bony structure right here, this is the fibula. This is the tibia. This fibula is lower, right? So you can see that it's lower. And so as the foot tries to evert, then these bones basically come in contact and bang into each other and prevent it. There's nothing over here. So first off, from a bony standpoint, this is what I want you to know. You can pause it and write that down if you want. Then we look at the ligamentous anatomy. So ligament-wise, look at these ligaments, right? So these are your lateral ligaments gonna be torn or stretched on that inversion. So these are your lateral, not very big, basically. When you look at the deltoid ligament on the medial, this is a big, thick, strong ligament. So you can see that. So these two things are what I'm going to ask you about why inversion ankle sprains are more common that we go. All right, so I'm going to go through real quickly on the prevention. This is pretty straightforward as opposed to like the prevention of most musculoskeletal injuries. Definitely we want to strengthen around the joint itself, especially the ankle. Those muscles are pretty weak. We want to stretch and make sure that we have the flexibility and we're not putting extra stress on areas. Here's the key though, balance and what we call neuromuscular control and the ability for that ankle to control itself, control those little areas of balance. We can assess balance. This is a test that we use to measure how much balance somebody has and is able to push out, see their balance on this one, and then they can go back in these other directions as you can go. So basically we can measure how much balance and then be able to identify what's going on. I mentioned neuromuscular control, just that control of the ankle, of all those muscles that are working to balance, to stabilize it through all motions, not just standing, right? It's good to stand here, but most of the ankle sprains occur during dynamic moving activities when we're running, cutting, landing from jumps. Hopefully we're not landing on something else. It's hard to prevent that, just keep people away, right? But if you have some of that strength, that hopefully can do that. And then the final one is this protection that we do. We're going to do some ankle taping, but there's definitely bracing options, something to prevent, and that's what both of these, the goals here is to try to limit the amount of inversion that's going to happen, even if the person lands or gets in an awkward position and that foot wants to invert a lot. So in your book, I'll direct you in class. In your book, as we start to tape, you can see some of the purposes that tape is used for. I'll talk a little bit about proprioception in class. That's just, you should know it. That's your body's awareness of position in space. That goes along hand in hand with neuromuscular control. So if you know exactly where you are in space, and you know that ankle is shifting, then there's a quick reaction to correct that, and hopefully that's the case. All right, so I got through that relatively quick, and I'll put some fun pictures up here. We're going to start being in the book, so I do want you to go look in the book. Review that first chapter. It talks about the purposes of tape. It talks about some of this stuff here. We'll get to that in class when we do our ankle taping lab. And then, I think it's chapter 2, but get to the ankle taping, and there's some pictures of the closed basket weave. That is the technique that we are going to learn. So that's all I got.